As some of you might know, we are actually going to be locating out of the city, but we want to stay on Vancouver Island. We're going to really miss the old heritage home, but we really miss the peace and tranquility of a much more rural area versus the urban areas. Living in the city again just really wasn't for us, so we've purchased a home in a very quiet, remote area so we can be back at the ocean side. We've passed over the keys to the heritage home and we'll get the keys to the new home in just a week. I'm really looking forward to giving you a full video tour of the new home on my next video, plus some really fun, exciting news to share with you. I wanted to share a video this week with you with the Bernat big blanket. I'm going to be doing a seed stitch, and this is so quick and easy. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a slip knot. So basically it's an open knot. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a chain of stitches. Really important note when creating your chain of stitches is you want to make sure that you're creating it relatively loose because you're going to be adding your first row of stitches off your chain. So I try to make my loops roughly about 3 to 4 inches, and I just pull the working yarn through each loop until I have 35 on my chain. I really love this color. This is the mist green color. Once you get to the end, you're going to use that last loop as your first chain to make your next row of stitches. So you're going to take that last loop, and I kind of just pull it up. Then I'm going to take the working yarn and pull it through, and this is going to start my next row off the chain. So I'm going to go to that top bump of every loop, and I'm going to create a new row of loop stitches. And with my thumb and my index finger, I'm kind of gauging about that 3 to 4 inches per loop. This blanket is really easy to follow as there's no specific tricks to this pattern. It's very basic. So even as a beginner, this is a super easy project to complete. So just count your stitches again once you've completed this first row off your chain. So you started with 35, you use that last loop as your start of your first row of stitches, so you should have a total 34 loops. That's what's going to make the width of the blanket. So that slip knot stitch on your chain counts as a loop. Now you're going to pull the working yarn in the direction you're going to go. So I'm going to take the working yarn, I'm going to use that last loop. Now what I want to do is take it and actually pull a loop through the front. Then what I'll be doing is pulling it through the back for my next stitch. Then I'm going to go to the front, pull it as a loop, then I'm going to go to the back. And this is what they call knit, purl. And what I want to create is a textured seed stitch blanket. A regular knit blanket is you're always pulling the working yarn through the back of the loop, and you're going to do that straight through. With a seed stitch, you're doing the knit, purl. But as a beginner, sometimes it's just easier to reference a front loop and a back loop with your work yarn. And that's the only part of this pattern. So I use my thumb to go through the loop with my working yarn. Then I take the working yarn and pull it to the back and pull the working yarn through. So I'm doing this front stitch. Then for the next loop, I'll do a back stitch, and it's just carrying on in the exact pattern, front, back, front, back. I love how thick and textured this bulky yarn looks in this particular seed stitch pattern. I always recommend to beginners is every time you complete a row, make sure you have the same amount of count of loops. So you should, with this specific pattern, have 34 loops every single time you finish a row. This will confirm that you're not missing any of the loops. Every row you're going to do the opposite of the row below. So I did a front stitch, now I'm going to do a back stitch. This was a back stitch as I go forward into my next row, so it will be a front stitch. And this is going to follow through every single row. So whatever the row is below, the next row you're doing on the top will be the opposite. Now that I'm in my second row of stitches, I'm doing the opposite to the first row. So that was a back stitch. I'm going to take the working yarn, I'm going to do a front stitch. Now when I go to the next stitch, that was a front stitch. Now I'm going to make it a back stitch. So again, it's just back, front, front. This blanket turned out in width approximately 4.5, almost 5 feet in width, and the length will determine how many rows we do. And this blanket size worked out to 5.5 feet. So this worked out to be quite the giant size blanket. I absolutely love the chenille yarn because you can machine wash and dry. I just recommend to do it on a delicate cycle. The other thing you want to make sure is that you're not scrunching everything together. You kind of want to make sure that as you're going around on your rows, that you're spacing it out a little bit. So this way, especially with those back loops, you're not going to miss them. Because of the size of the yarn as well as the width of this blanket, it's sometimes easier to do this off of a floor because of its size. But once you want to get about a half a dozen to a dozen rows, to do it off the table is no problem. But as you can see, I'm just doing the opposite to the row I did below. So whatever was a front stitch will be a back stitch, and whatever was a back stitch will now be a front stitch. And just keep repeating. It's very easy. This blanket will stitch up in no time. The bulk of this yarn will take no time at all, so you can complete this project in about 3 hours. But if you want to break up that project, it's really easy to see where you've left off. So wherever your next stitch is, just look at the stitch below, and that will tell you if you need to do a top stitch or a bottom stitch. And if you're a beginner, it really is helpful just to make a small chain of maybe 10 stitches and practice a few rows before you start the full blanket project. There's absolutely no other rules applied to this entire blanket pattern. That's what makes it so easy, but the results are absolutely beautiful. The repetition of front stitch, back stitch really makes it easy to remember. But as I said, it's really easy to miss a back stitch, so you kind of want to span out your project as you're working on it so you don't miss those loops in the back. Once I get into about a dozen rows, the size of the blanket's going to be too big for the table, so I will head down to the floor to finish the project. And again, the entire size of the blanket worked out to 4.5 feet in width approximately and 5.5 feet in length. The other thing I love to do that makes it really helpful is make sure that I have my working yarn placed in the direction I'm going. So every time I finished all the way to the right, I place my working yarn to go to the left. When I reach that end, when I'm starting from the left, I move my working yarn all the way to the right. This just helps pull the loops up much quicker. If you want to attach a new skein of yarn, all you're going to do is just tie it into a knot. This type of blanket yarn is so thick, you're not even going to see the knot. So I tie it, making sure that I pull from all 4 sides, then I just cut off the tails. Once you carry on with your loops, like I mentioned, you're not even going to see the knot because this is so bulky. And I used full 6 skeins of yarn for this entire project. The other thing I love about this pattern is it's going to actually look the exact same on both sides. So I'll show you that as we get a little bit more into the row so you can see it from the front to the back. But even the last stitch on both ends of the blanket, all you're going to do is carry on with the exact pattern. So if you ended the row on a back stitch, you'll start your new row on a front stitch. So nothing about this pattern changes even with the sides of the blanket. I actually plan to make some bath mats out of this type of yarn in an upcoming video, so I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. As you continue on with your blanket rows, you're always trying to aim again for that 3 to 4 inches in your loops. The bigger the loops, the more kind of lucid the blanket is. The tighter the loops, the more kind of tight filled the blanket's going to be. So you definitely want to have a consistency on the size of your loops. Now that I'm getting to a halfway point of the blanket, as I said, it's sometimes easier to come down to the floor so that way you can keep a nice consistency of your loops. Because of the width, if your table front is not going to be big enough, it's really easy to miss those back loops if you don't have a nice area to stretch across. So I brought the blanket back to the table, and you definitely want to make sure you have enough yarn to close the blanket. So all we're going to do is take 2 loops and pull the working yarn through both loops. And what we're going to be doing is closing off the blanket, and then I'll show you how I taper off the tails, both from the slip knot as well as the end of the blanket. So again, you're just taking 2 loop stitches, pull the working yarn through, hold that remainder loop, grab another stitch, sandwich those together, so you have 2, pull the working yarn through 2. And you're almost kind of basically closing the blanket off, and it's got a little bit of a braid, very similar to the chain, so they look the same at the top and the bottom. So pretty easy, and as you can see, basically the side of your last row is just going to kind of have a similar look to a braid. So taking 2 loop stitches, create 1, add the next loop, have 2 in your hand, pull the working yarn through. Once you get to the end, you're just going to take that last little bit, and what I do is I just tie it off into a knot. I actually make 2 knots, and then what I do is I weave in the tail, but you could cut it off as well. It's totally up to you. And then the tail from the very beginning, I do the exact same thing. I tie an additional knot and then I weave it. The weave part of just kind of pushing it back and forth in between the stitches will hold it in place. I wanted to give a spy's eye of where we're going, and as you can see, it's just a lot of nature. There's going to be lots of peace and quiet, and I'm really looking forward to showing you a full video tour of our new location. When we had to close this house, we actually had to close it earlier than when we could get the keys for the new house. So we're going to be in a little bit of a transit, but that's okay. We're just going to have some fun. But I am really looking forward to showing you more details and a full new home tour. Plus, we have some really fun announcements to share with you soon. Thank you so much for watching this week's video, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you soon. Until then, take care.